The following is an excerpt from the book Experiences of Thought by Anthony Kahn, available now on Amazon.com and Kindle. Loving logic in matters of mind. If I only had words. Blots of ink forming patterns on a page, vibrations encoded with abstract meaning traveling from mouth to ear, logical building blocks joined together to express ideas. All of these rather distinct descriptions relate the same ingenious mental constructs that we are all so familiar with. Words. Where would we be without them? We both think and communicate via their use and can interpret them in a variety of forms using our senses of sight, hearing, and even touch. The curious thing about words is that they have no single inventor and no single form, but rather we collectively invent them and continue to mold them to suit our environments in accordance with a kind of survival of the fittest logic, as we discussed in section 4.2. Edward Bulwer Lytton famously coined the phrase, "the pen is mightier than the sword," back in the 19th century, and in so doing rather eloquently conveyed an important truth. The pen has been wielded to great effect throughout history, conquering ignorance with every stroke and spilling the ink forming the words that would bring an end to prehistory and shape our understanding of the past as well as our present. Clearly, words are powerful and valuable tools, but how is it that they emerge so naturally, and what are their limitations? Let us consider both of these questions by looking at some cliched patterns in their usage. Firstly, words have to be made up of patterns of sound that are utterable via the human vocal organs, and some of the simplest words tend to take the form of sounds from our environment, such as splash or whir, a phenomenon given a name of its own, onomatopoeia. Many of the earliest words that we use in life are learned at a very early age, and thus must be simple to pronounce and follow a simple pattern of usage. Mom, I want food, for instance, will get you your required nutrients with a simple string of single-syllable sounds. Now, obviously, there are thousands of different languages in use around the world, and there are similarities between them, in many cases due to common origins or borrowed terms, as well as gaping differences. But there will always be some simple logic or grammatical rules that underlie the way in which the building blocks of the language are assembled together. Whilst the more abstract concepts that a language must convey will inevitably result in more complex forms, the core of the language should tend towards simplicity as it emerges from the environment in which it is used, where the physiology of the speaker themselves is paramount. It is no coincidence that we refer to the logical coding that instructs a computer processor as a language, for this coding too uses logical building blocks to convey explicit tasks. We might tell the processor to do some operation while some condition is met. We might instruct that if some statement is true, then perform operation A. Else, if some statement is false, then perform operation B. Of course, computer languages tend to be much more mathematical in their syntax than spoken languages. We are, after all, using them to speak with a robotic mass of billions of transistors. But it is surprising, nevertheless, just how much mathematical logic and environmental parallels find their way into our everyday speech. How often do we hear of social circles or spheres of influence? How often do we speak of ideas and traditions that carry momentum or possess inertia? When we watch movies, we are frequently required to put two and two together to solve a mystery. Why does political opinion sway like the movement of a pendulum, as if to correct itself against left-wing and right-wing extremes? At the heart of our usage of all these logical analogies is the fact that our mental world is ultimately an extension of our physical world, and the same logic tends to govern both. Our words must describe our world, and the language of our world is logic. So much hinges on our use of words that we must possess vast vocabularies and be adept at drawing from them in creative ways to communicate our thoughts with others effectively. But what happens when words just don't do justice to the thing that we are trying to describe? We may try and borrow words from other languages, but that can only help us to a point. The problem is that mere words will never actually be the thing that they describe. What is in a name, after all? Words must necessarily condense and simplify bucket loads of information down into a simple, utterable collection of sounds. A word can do its job when all parties involved have knowledge of that which it describes. But you simply cannot adequately describe any experience via such abstract means as packets of sound or blots of ink on a page, unless the intended audience already has like experience to draw from. We can get caught up over syntax and even revere sacred words, but how can any word be special when it is such an abysmal representation of the complexity which it exists to describe? You are very much more than your name, are you not? Yes, words are mighty and so much can be done with them, but their power ultimately derives from the mind which uses and interprets them. If we only had words, then truly we would have nothing at all.